evening, everyone. I'm Deborah Carden, the Baltimore Museum of Industry's Director of Development. Welcome to tonight's special program, Behind the Scenes with Project Liberty Ship. The BMI and Project Liberty Ship have teamed up to share the history of shipbuilding in Baltimore. BMI volunteers will use materials from the museum's collections and archives to explore how Baltimore became a shipbuilding power. Then we'll hear from volunteers from the Brown about the ship's proud history of service, and we'll also get a glimpse of what visitors can see this summer when they are able to visit the World War II vessel in person. Tonight's program highlights an important initiative that the BMI has been working on for several years to collect and share the stories of the men and women who worked at the Bethlehem Steel Mill at Sparrows Point. Hopefully, many of you have participated in recent programs that have explored such topics as the role of Black workers and women at the steel mill, or perhaps you've listened to our podcast series, Sparrows Point, An American Steel Story. Tonight, we'll be looking at a different side of the Bethlehem Steel story, how it galvanized Baltimore's shipbuilding industry, which in turn produced one of our country's last surviving Liberty ships from World War II, the SS John W. Brown. I would like to take a moment to thank our friends at Project Liberty Ship for partnering with us on this program. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of Mike Barnes and Rebecca Barkowski for working so closely with us to bring to life the amazing story of this important Baltimore treasure. And I'd also like to express our deep appreciation to the members, supporters, and volunteers of both the BMI and Project Liberty Ship. I'd like to give a special shout out to BMI members for making programs like this one possible. For those of you who are members, we know how much you enjoy our behind the scenes tours. This evening's program is meant to provide a taste of this wonderful benefit and to hopefully entice many more of you to become members as well. Before we start, I just want to remind you that although your mics have been muted, please feel free to use the chat to ask questions or to share comments. And if you're experiencing technical issues, please use the Q&A. And now I'd like to turn the program over to the BMI's Assistant Registrar, Curtis Durham.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you everyone for tuning into our program. I serve as the BMI's Assistant Registrar and am responsible for the objects in the BMI's collections. Tonight, we're going to hear from my counterparts in the BMI's archives, who care for the documents and photographs within our collection. You're going to hear from a variety of voices this evening, each focused on a different part of this big story of shipbuilding in Baltimore. Now, let's turn to the folks who have spent so much time caring for these artifacts and who know them best. Ken Jones is a longtime volunteer with the BMI and has spent the last year and a half inventorying the BMI's Bethlehem Steel archival collection. He's going to provide us with an overview of Baltimore shipbuilding history using images drawn from the BMI's Bethlehem Steel collection. All right, Ken, let's get started.
Thanks, Curtis. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started on our presentation. For the past year or so, I've been processing and cataloging the BMI's Bethlehem Steel collection. I became fascinated with Bethlehem shipyards. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what captured my attention. The story starts with acknowledging that Baltimore is a port city and has been since its beginnings. The appearance of the piers and docks in this 1900 map of Baltimore Harbor represent the opportunity for shipbuilders to locate here. Using this contemporary map, we can see where Bethlehem yards were located. Bethlehem operated yards at Key Highway, Fort McHenry, Fairfield, and Sparrows Point. We're going to take a look at each of these yards, their origins, how they became part of Bethlehem, the work they performed, and what they are now. Let's start with the Baltimore yards. The history of the Key Highway yard begins with the Skinner family. Seeing the opportunity of being in a large active port, Eastern Shore boat builders William and Jeremiah Skinner came to Baltimore in the 1820s to build and repair wooden ships. Over time and through acquisition of other shipbuilders, their Key Highway yard eventually grew to a 35-acre shipbuilding complex. The Skinner yard thrived building vessels of all types. The Fort McHenry yard got its start in 1879. Prominent Baltimorean John W. Garrett and his sons organized the Baltimore Dry Dock Company and built a large graving dock. They leased the graving dock to boat and engine builder Mouster and Reaney, who named their operation Columbian Iron Works and Dry Dock, and began building iron and steel hulled vessels. The company had initial success, but went into receivership in 1899 and becomes part of the Skinner yards. In 1915, the Skinner properties were forced into receivership and acquired by Baltimore Dry Dock and Shipbuilding. This company was bought out by Bethlehem in 1921. Bethlehem turned their combined yards into repair facilities to complement their shipbuilding operation at Sparrows Point. These yards pioneered and built a reputation for complex conversions and jumboizing ships, practices that extended the life of an outdated vessel by making it larger or changing its purpose. The first ship to undergo this procedure was the Gulf Meadows. The vessel was separated and a new larger midsection was put into place. The conversion of this tanker increased the vessel's capacity by 25% and extended its life by 12 to 15 years. The conversion took just 36 days compared to the 18 months to plan and build a tanker of comparable size. The vessel was renamed the Gulf Beaver after the conversion. In their heyday, the Baltimore yards employed 1,700 craftspeople, repaired an average of 500 ships per year from all over the world, converted and jumboized tankers, cargo ships, passenger ships, container ships, molten sulfur, and chemical carriers. The yards closed in 1982. Today, the Key Highway Yard is home to the Ritz-Carlton and Harborview residential communities, while the Fort McHenry Yard maintains a maritime heritage, hosting several Port of Baltimore-related terminals. In January of 1941, the United States Maritime Commission implemented the Emergency Shipbuilding Program to build a commercial fleet to support the war effort. Naturally, it looked to Bethlehem for help. Bethlehem's approach was to create a shipbuilding factory. It took over two idled facilities, the Union Shipbuilding Company in Fairfield and a Pullman car fabricating shop in Curtis Bay. It linked the two by railroad. Work on building the Fairfield yard began in February of 1941. The complex was spread over 136 acres with 16 shipways, 75 cranes, 10 locomotives, and more than 200 flat cars. While construction crews were building out the yard, shipbuilders were busy laying their first keel. To increase production efficiency, the yard employed a modular construction concept. Components of the ships were built at the fabricating shop and then transported by rail to the shipways for staging and final assembly. In April of 1941, workers laid the first keel. 5 months later, on September 27th of 1941, Fairfield launched the SS Patrick Henry, the first Liberty ship built in the United States. As a shipbuilding factory, the Fairfield yard employed as many as 47,000 workers. At peak production in 1943, average construction time for a new ship was approximately 30 days. The yard built a total of 384 Liberty ships, more than any other shipyard in the nation. The yard also built 94 Victory ships and 45 LSTs. It was one of the most productive wartime shipyards. Shipbuilding operations ended in 1945. Today, the area maintains its maritime heritage, hosting several Port of Baltimore related terminals. The Sparrows Point Yard was established in 1891 by the Maryland Steel Company. It was acquired by Bethlehem in 1916 as part of the purchase of Maryland Steel. Occupying 200 acres on the east side of Patapsco River where it meets the Chesapeake Bay, the yard had two unique advantages. It was strategically located near Baltimore's busy port, and its source of steel was the adjacent Sparrows Point Mill. A significant reason for the success of the yard was the world's growing demand for crude oil and the tankers needed to transport it. Beginning in 1949, Bethlehem developed 10 standard tanker designs, making Sparrows Point a dominant player in the tanker market. This dominance of the tanker market continued into the mid-1970s, leading to the characterization of the yard as the patriarch of U.S. tanker builders. To maintain its leadership position, the company made major investments in the yard in 1970. The building ways and outfitting periods were improved. New fabrication facilities were built to improve production efficiency. The most significant improvement was the construction of a large new flexible building basin. This 1973 picture shows the completed yard improvements with a 265,000 deadweight ton tanker under construction in the building basin. While owned by Bethlehem, the Sparrows Point Yard was among the most active yards in the nation, building tankers, freighters, and container ships. The Sparrows Point Yard employed thousands of workers. Over 600 vessels made their maiden voyage from the yard. Countless ships had their purposes changed or lives extended. The 1970s and 80s were a difficult time for the U.S. shipbuilding industry. In 1975, the industry built 75 commercial ships. In 1981, the U.S. government eliminated a beneficial subsidy. In 1985, the industry produces just 5 commercial ships, a 75% decline in 10 years. In 1997, the shipyard is sold to Baltimore Marine Industries, ending Bethlehem's involvement in shipbuilding. Today, the Sparrows Point Yard, along with the former steel mill, is being transformed into Trade Point Atlantic, a 3,300-acre global logistics center featuring a combination of access to deep water berths, rail, and highways. That's a brief overview of what captured my attention. If it got your attention and you're interested in digging deeper, visit the Point to Point blog at thebmi.org, where you will find a more complete look at the yards. And now back to Curtis.
Thanks so much, Ken, for that brief history of Bethlehem Steel's Baltimore shipyards. So now we've got the manufacturing facilities, materials, and processes. We have the tools and the thousands of men and women it takes to make it all work. We've got everything we need to build a ship. It's time to unfold the instructions. And with that, we turn to Bob Pratt, another longtime BMI volunteer, who will help us understand the importance of the Bethlehem Steel Ship Plan Collection.
Building ships. By the time Baltimore became a shipbuilding center, scale drawings for ship construction were a highly skilled trade. As always, models represented the beginning of concept and design. Shipyards by the late 1800s spanned from the Inner Harbor to Fort McHenry and beyond. Ships transformed from wood and sail to steel and steam. Ship parts were now formed in foundries and cut from sheets of steel. Steam engines were developed for various plants, various sizes, various purposes. Ship plans foretell the use and success of ships, what they carry, how stable they are, and how fast they travel. Fast forwarding to Bethlehem Steel Corporation, now established in Baltimore, we look at the practice of drafting plans for these ships. By early 1900, ships are now made of steel propelled by steam. They're bigger, heavier, faster, and can be produced in a factory basis much faster than previous. There are also many ships that need to be repaired or converted. That all begins to happen on Key Highway, which is the footprint of very old shipyards now in the possession of Bethlehem Steel. Both Key Highway repair yards, called Baltimore Yard, and the Sparrows Point Steel Mill and Shipyard, dating back to the late 1800s, both have in their facilities drafting rooms. The drafting rooms housed naval architects as well as straight draftsmen of ships' plans. The naval architects would pass on the concept and design specifications and perhaps a model to these draftsmen, which now numbered in the hundreds. Once the drafting began, the process resembled designing a town. You had measurements required for every detail. Power plants needed to be driven, lights needed to be wired, piping for all purposes within a ship, storage, lifting cranes, equipment for transporting goods, even the needs for passengers and crew members, all designed within this town-like ship. The United States had by this time well-organized vocational trade schools within high schools, universities, academies, and private schools. Ship plans were protected as unique documents. They were stored in these drafting departments in vaults and well-organized libraries. One ship could represent well over 300 sheets of drawings at various sizes, the smallest being A, which is like an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, all the way up to size E, which could be pushing 20 feet long. Ships are designed and built for all purposes. And so within Bethlehem's drafting room, you see just an assortment of types. During World War I and World War II, assembly line production was enhanced so that Sparrows Point had at its original location a number of shipbuilding slips. A plan would travel the yard where they would scale up to make templates for cutting steel, or they would supervise foundries, or they would run the gamut of the yard itself, explaining to the laborers just what needed to be done, what needed to be built, cut, etc. So by the end of the Cold War, the US government drew back their support for their cooperation with Bethlehem Corporation, and the Bethlehem shipyards began to close. What to do with all these thousands and thousands of ships' plans? Down at Sparrows Point, they were all placed in containers, and the future of the containers could have been Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the original corporation location, or Wilmington, Delaware, Hadley Museum. But in the Key Highway shipyard drafting room, these plans ended up at the Baltimore Museum of Industry by donation. Eventually, the task of putting them back in order in a safe location within the museum facilities began a almost 10-year process of organizing, reorganizing, finding safe metal flat files for preservation, and then eventually indexing. Almost 4.5 years of constant indexing resulted in the plans being brought to the public. All in all, the requests for viewing these historic documents, ship plans, that span almost 90 years from the earliest late 1800s. It is a vast collection, a valuable collection, and to many, many people, a stimulating, interesting look into the past.
Thank you so much, Bob, for walking us through the life of a ship plan. Very fascinating stuff. And now we're going to spotlight one of our archives volunteers, Marty Yeager. As a mechanical designer and engineer, his skills made him a perfect fit for organizing the Bethlehem Steel ship plans. With his help, the project is nearing completion.
I saw an ad for the Museum of Industry, and I went on their website and sent them my volunteer application. And I heard back from them like that afternoon. And I had an interview the next day. And when I met with Matt and Jane offered me to work in the collections, but Matt said, with your engineering background, maybe you should be involved with the Bethlehem Steel shipbuilding drawings. And that sounded good to me. So that's how I got here. This month will be 5 years. I like it. I do. I like being around drawings and having to do drawings the last 12 years of my job on the computer. We did not have drawings. We had 8.5 by 11 or, 11 by 17 prints if we were lucky. That was it. So this is like, to me, this is a bonanza. Plus, these are all huge 15-foot drawings, so you can actually see stuff. This particular drawing was done to emphasize how huge the L furnace, the L blast furnace was compared to the existing one. And I guess it wasn't good enough for them just to show the actual furnace. They stuck in the Washington Monument, which I thought was really cool. That's one of the cooler drawings that I've found since I've been working here. I mean, it's amazing. Because when I worked on small stuff. I never worked on anything as large as this. Mainly, I think the largest thing I ever worked on was like a 2-foot by 3-foot part. And these things are just, the scale of them is just out of sight. I can't even imagine dealing with that. All the steel and the electricals and all that. It's just. So this one's actually 566 feet long after the modification. So that's kind of neat. I like that.
Thanks, Marty. You've really given us a sense of the scale of the work you've done for the Ship Plans project. I like the part about the Washington Monument in the drawing. It really captures the great surprises you can find when working with historic artifacts. And now let's hear from my colleague, Maggie Marzolf, the BMI's Assistant Archivist. She's your go-to person for public access to this extensive collection.
I couldn't tell you everything we have. We have so much. There's so many plans. I wouldn't be able to name them all off the top of my head. Each of the flat files contains a variety of different ship plans. It's not all one file for one ship. It's according to the numbers that are on the ship plans. Those aren't assigned by us. Those were put in there by Betsale to identify the plans. Some of them are rolled up. Some of them are flat. The ones that are rolled up won't fit into the flat files if they were unrolled. Some of them are very fragile and wearing on the ends, so you have to be careful when unrolling them. We have the oversized scanners now where I can scan the ship plans in very, very close detail, so they'll be able to take the digital images home and you'll be able to zoom in and see the smaller pieces that you might not be able to catch when you're just looking at them dead on. We have a database, basically a spreadsheet of all of our plans that we have in our collections, and you are able to search the spreadsheet according to type of ship or the ship name itself. We also, if the year that it was built was indicated on the ship plan, you can also search by the year if you want to kind of get a range of what might have been built when. For access, people can contact me and I will be able to get at the ship plans that they ask for. People who build models, miniature models, people who know somebody that might have worked on the ship itself after it was set out, or worked on it to build it. Other people, like lawyers, that might look at the plans for their cases. And then some people who just have a general interest in shipbuilding, might have interest in Liberty ships, for example. They might want to look at plans to see how they are different from others, just from a completely historical research point of view.
Thanks, Maggie. It's great to know how folks can get access to the BMI's archival collection. Hopefully you'll be getting some calls soon. I hope everyone enjoyed this behind the scenes look into the BMI's vast collections and the opportunity to hear about the work being done to preserve them for the public. These volunteers have undertaken the tremendous task of cataloging the Bethlehem Steel artifacts, and this project would not be possible without their time and dedication. Now we're going to hear about a monumental effort to preserve a Bethlehem Steel artifact that some would say is the biggest Baltimore-built thing that moves. The BMI's partner tonight is Project Liberty Ship, a group of volunteers that have been preserving and sharing the Liberty Ship, SS John W. Brown, for the past 33 years. For tonight's program, they put together a brief history to share, as well as a glimpse of what there is to see below decks of this national treasure. Now let's travel across the harbor to meet the star of tonight's program.
I also ask this Congress for authority and for funds sufficient to manufacture additional munitions and war supplies of many kinds to be turned over to those nations which are now in actual war with aggressor nations. Our most useful and immediate role is to act as an arsenal for them as well as for ourselves.
President Roosevelt called Liberty ships dreadful-looking objects. Time magazine called them ugly ducklings. But these prefabricated vessels could be built quickly. So early in 1941, only a few months after delivering his State of the Union address to Congress, the President ordered American shipyards to go into production. On September 27, 1941, the SS Patrick Henry was launched at the Baltimore Bethlehem Shipyard, the first of the 2,710 Liberty ships launched in 18 United States shipyards. The Baltimore shipyard built 384 Liberties, more than any other yard. Measuring almost 1.5 football fields in length, Liberty ships carried American tanks, trucks, airplanes, and troops to the fighting fronts in Europe and Asia. They became a bridge of ships during World War II. Their crews were civilians in the American Merchant Marine. Their defensive gunners were sailors in the Navy Armed Guard. 229 Liberties were lost, but those that survived helped win the war. One of them, the SS John W. Brown, was built in less than 2 months and launched from the Baltimore, Maryland shipyard on September 7, 1942. In her maiden voyage during the war, she sailed around Cape Horn and the Cape of Good Hope to the Soviet Union, and then made 7 other voyages across the Atlantic to Europe and the Mediterranean. After the war, the Brown served for almost 40 years as a New York City school ship in New York Harbor, moored first in the East River and then in the Hudson. She was retired to the James River, Virginia Ghost Fleet in 1983, where she rusted for 5 years. In 1988, she was rescued, and unable to sail under her own power, she was towed to Baltimore. 3 years later, in 1991, she was ready to sail again. Since then, the Brown has made living history cruises from ports up and down the Atlantic seaboard and in Canada. She has given thousands of visitors in ports or at sea a chance to learn about her role and the sacrifices made in winning the war. Living history cruises on the Brown take visitors on day-long sailing adventures from Baltimore into the Chesapeake Bay, recreating the wartime atmosphere experienced by those who once served in the mission. Hundreds of volunteers, many who served in World War II, have worked hard to make the Brown seaworthy, to become a living memorial to those valiant years in the history of America. Tireless efforts continue today in the endless tasks of removing rust and replacing parts to maintain her original beauty and to take her back into the open sea. The images and descriptions that follow capture the many details and moods of the Brown, of its simplicity and complexity, of the precision of its many fittings played against the rough edges of casual clutter. Perhaps most important of all in judging this measure of the ship's beauty are her shipmates. Originally strangers to each other, they have become family. Still, the question remains, were these ships dreadful-looking objects? Some may still say so. Those who built them and those who sailed them were proud of them. And alumni of other Liberty ships and those who saved the Brown are especially fond of this old steamer. Beyond its rugged utility in war, and its value as an historical maritime treasure today, the Brown is truly a beautiful ship. On rough waters or still, she is a poem at sea.
Poem at Sea. Wow, what a great story about the Brown. If you have a great memory about the SS John W. Brown, please share it in the chat. Now let's hear from some current Brown volunteers.
Hello, my name is Rebecca, and I'm a volunteer crew member on the SS John W. Brown. About 2 years ago, my family and I had an amazing time on a living history cruise. While we were waiting to board, a crew member asked us to volunteer. I thought, what an amazing opportunity to get to work on this ship. Since then, my daughters and I have learned so much from the dedicated and knowledgeable crew. We are so grateful to be a part of preserving this historic treasure. Thank you for this opportunity to give you a quick tour of the SS John W. Brown. I hope you will come aboard to learn what it was like for the crew in 1944, sailing across the Atlantic. When you visit, the tour will take you all over the ship, up and down many ladders, through narrow passageways, and into massive holds that give you a sense of how much the ship is below the waterline. There were many roles to fill to keep this ship running. Seamen could be assigned to the wheelhouse, which contains the equipment needed by the captain to guide the Brown at sea. They may have been assigned to the bridge wing or to the deck. Seamen would have used this boom and winch to load and unload cargo. A ship's steep ladder leads down into the converted hold, where you can find out more about the men and women who built, sailed, and protected the Brown in the 3 shipboard museums: Shipbuilding, Merchant Marine, and Naval Armed Guard. Just across from the museums, you can see the troop berthing areas. The bunks for troops are stacked high, designed for efficiency, not comfort, while the crew shared quarters on an upper deck called a forecastle, like this one. Officers, such as the chief mate, would have had their own quarters. Now, let's head to the engine room, where Mike Schneider will tell you about the heart of the Brown.
This is the engine order telegraph. Obviously, this is the portion of the engine order telegraph that is in the engine room. This is how the engineers get their propulsion instructions from the mate on watch on the bridge. You can see there are 3 ahead speeds, 3 astern speeds. When the bridge wants us to go in the ahead direction, they will pull on their handle. They're moving their handle, moves the arrow down here. That arrow would swing up to the half ahead position. When we see that order, we will take our handle and move our handle up to the half ahead position. That will indicate to the people on the bridge that we have heard their order, we understand it, and we're going to execute it. Finished with engines is the signal that we get when they are all done with steam propulsion. That's where the engine order telegraph is right now. A very simple piece of machinery. It is linked to the bridge with bicycle chain, sprockets, and piano wire. I think you'll find the engine room on John W. Brown a fascinating place to visit and to look around. The ship has a classic reciprocating steam engine for its main propulsion engine. That engine is all open, so the linkages are all visible. You will see the boilers where steam is generated to run that engine and the auxiliary machinery. And you'll see a variety of auxiliary machinery which provides the support for the habitability, for the operation of the engine, and for all the other features that take place on the ship. As you probably know, the boilers generate the steam. Steam is used to drive the main propulsion engine and all the pieces of auxiliary machinery. When that steam has done its work, we then condense it back into water or to condensate, and then pump that water back into the boiler where it is converted to steam again. So it is the steam and water is a continuous closed loop cycle to power a ship like this.
Heading back to the upper decks, your tour guide will take you to the radio room, which has been refurbished in authentic World War II format by several Brown volunteers. They will be happy to tell you all about how it functions. Near the stern, this 5-inch 38 caliber gun is a reminder of the constant danger that awaited Liberty ships as they transported much needed supplies and reinforcements to American troops. This is just a glimpse of some of the things you can see in person aboard the SS John W. Brown. And it's all thanks to the hard work of many volunteers. Long after the Brown might have disappeared into history, she still sails, a proud and irreplaceable reminder of an era long past, and of the men and women who built, sailed, and protected her. Now, Sophia, one of our youngest Brown volunteers, has a special message for you about our recent Volunteer Day celebration, which was held on June 5th.
Hello, my name is Sophia. I'm a volunteer crew member of the SS John W. Brown. I want everyone to know about this Liberty ship because she was built right here in Baltimore at the Bethlehem Fairfield Shipyard. Not everyone knows that the members of the Merchant Marine and Naval Armed Guard manned Liberty ships like this one during World War II. They played an important role in winning the war. I am proud of her history and admire the men and women who served our country during this time. Today, the crew of the SS John W. Brown is celebrating Volunteer Day. We have recently met the huge milestone of 2 million volunteer hours. This took 33 years, from 1988 to 2021. Financial support of Project Liberty ship members, donations from many generous people, and the all-volunteer crew have kept this ship sailing. We invite you to join us in preserving this historic maritime treasure. We would love to welcome you aboard the SS John W. Brown.
Wow, it's great to see kids like Sophia with a passion for preserving and sharing the past. I'm definitely going to check out her YouTube channel and her other Brown videos. And thank you for the invitation to visit Sophia. We plan to see you this July for a special members-only behind-the-scenes tour of the SS John W. Brown. For any members in the audience tonight, you'll be receiving your invitation in early July. That brings us to the end of tonight's program. While creating this program, we discovered so many interesting ways that the BMI and Project Liberty Ship's missions and histories complement each other. We look forward to collaborating on future programs to bring our members and supporters more great stories. I'd like to thank our partners at Project Liberty Ship again for their incredible work at preserving the SS John W. Brown, and encourage everyone to visit the ship this summer. The BMI is also looking forward to visitors this summer. We have a members-only celebration this Saturday, June 26th, and a public opening on July 3rd. Information about tickets for both days is on our website. Finally, everyone tonight will receive an email after the program. It will include a survey and the links we shared in the chat. We will also be posting a recording of tonight's presentation and will send everyone a notification when that is ready for viewing. Thank you and have a great evening.